So first of all, sorry for the delay. I tested my laptop on Tuesday morning. It worked okay, of course, and now there is no way for it to pick up the HDMI signal. So Paolo is kindly helping me, but the network is not collaborating, but right now it seems like we are almost ready. As I was presented, I'm Natalia. I will talking about my personal journey in trying to understand inclusion. I think the topic can be difficult to discuss, to approach, and perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you. So I will have to rush through a few slides, but let's try to make the best out of this. So who am I? I'm going to present. I have a few slides presenting me because I'm recently been appointed a DjangCon Fellow since April this year. So I feel, I consider that I needed to give you like a proper presentation because it's of my role in the community, but I will rush a little bit through this. I have been talking to a lot of you and I have been sharing who I am, what I do, what did I do. As I say, I'm a DjangCon Fellow. I have studied computer science where I was born. I consider myself a Python, a Django expert, to the extent that you can consider yourself an expert, right? There is always things to learn. I'm passionate about tests, so I will be looking for Andrew to talk about the test. I have many things to discuss in the good way. I'm a very expressive speaker, as you can see. According to ChatGPT, this can be described as gesturing enthusiast. I have an extensive experience presenting in Spanish, but this is my first time presenting in English to a large audience, so I'm nervous. Thank you. I'm nervous. I'm worried that you might not understand my accent, but the captioners will surely help with this, so thank you very much for your work. Then, what else about me? I was born in Argentina, in the middle of Argentina, what that arrow is pointing to. I'm currently living in Uruguay, which is a very small country between Brazil and Argentina. It's an amazing country. And I'm also a fan of drinking mate, which is a local beverage that is very common in Argentina, Brazil, and Uruguay. I attended my first PyCon. This is the image is a little bit on top of the text, I think, because of the version of the software, but we can work with that. I attended for the first time to a PyCon in 2009 in Argentina. Then I went to PyCon US in Atlanta, and that was my first Django sprint. There was a Django sprint occurring during PyCon, and I got to be with the mascot, recently appointed at that time, and it was super fun. I probably met some of you there, but I really don't remember, sorry. And this is my first DjangoCon in 2023. I'm super excited to be here. Who was I? I studied in Cordoba. I was a student and a teaching assistant. I did work for a startup with Soap, Plum, Twisted, Flask. I also worked with Eiffel, which is a programming language. Eiffel, actually, I think that's a very pronunciation, which is an object-oriented programming language, which is very cool, but not very known. I have also done my first share of C programming. My first job was in 2005, and I've been working before being a fellow. I took a sabbatical, but before that, I was at Canonical, the company behind Ubuntu, for 13 years. I did a little bit of everything, always Python-related and web service-related. So this slide is very important for me because the topic diversity, equity, and inclusion is delicate. So I want to be very open that this is not about recipes, this is not about hard rules, this is not about me telling you what to do or what not to do. This is not the talk. We can have the talk eventually, but this is not what I want to talk. What I do want to talk is sharing things that I have been through, sharing a little bit of theory that I have been reading about, and I'm trying to connect the two. Experiences, sharing with you actual experiences that I had, and trying to link that to some, not theoretical concept, but more like concept taken from bibliography and things that will help us try to, I hope, will help us try to think about this topic, reflect, and raise questions. I have a lot of questions, and maybe you might have too, and maybe together we might find some answers, or answers that are good enough for us as a community. So I'm going to start sharing some recent experiences. What you can see in that image is an image of my backyard. It's very tight, very tidy in that image. That's the image of the result after getting at an arborist, gardener, working in the backyard. I had very tall trees and very overgrown bushes. It was a mess. So we hired someone to clean it up a little bit. So at the end of the work of the arborist said, well, I mean, we were saying, yes, goodbye, thank you for being here. He said, it's a shame that your trees go out so out of control. He said, like, I mean, this should have been fixed before by the person that mows your lawn. So he was like, well, that's okay. I mean, I'm paying you. This is the work that you're doing. That's fine. I mean, and he said, but no, this could not stay like this. Who mows your lawn? I mean, who is the person that in charge of your garden? Because that person should be taking care of this. So I said, yeah, well, it's Maria, the last name of Maria. And he said, wait, a woman? It's like, he literally said, like this face, a woman mows your lawn? And I took that as a completely inappropriate, but you will think that's the worst of the experience that I'm sharing. But no, that took me by surprise. And one of the concepts that I want to share with you is this thing that we have deep down fried in our brains, you know, baked in our brains. I've been raised by an Italian family, and my grandmother was very traditionalist and was very favorism of male. And I don't know why I answered this, but she worked with her husband. I felt the need to justify why a woman was mowing my lawn. I hated myself. So as you can see, that was me, very conscious of diversity and inclusion, and I'm I think about this a lot. I try to do things about it, and I got this answer. So this is an example not only about the things that we have baked in the brain, but also about how we make mistakes, how we have things that are very difficult to change, and how I make a lot of mistakes. I'm terrified of saying something here that might play against this topic, but some things are very deep down coded in our structure, in our brain. The other experience that I want to share, that's me using an electric sander on a piece of wood. I really love woodwork. I am an amateur. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I've tried to do some woodwork when I have some time. And I've been trying to buy some tooling in order to make that a little bit easier. So for Mother's Day this year, am I speaking too fast? Okay. So for Mother's Day this year, I went to the hardware store and I said, hello, I'm here to buy my Mother's Day present. I want to buy an electric sander. So the clerk said, hi, how are you? Yeah, I mean, I live in a very small town. People, it's not like they know me because I'm new to the city. I've been living there for 9 years. But they have seen me buy a lot of wood-related things in that store. And it's always me that they want doing the purchases. And I'm like, hello, I need, which tool do you recommend? You know, there is this cut that we do with a jigsaw, and sometimes we have errors, 2-3 millimeters that we need to fix. Do you have an electric sander that will work for that? Yeah, he showed me a product, and then he said, okay, so this is for, I was in the store with my partner and my child. My partner was there in order just to keep my child into not touching everything. He couldn't care less about tools. And he was like, oh, this is for when he cuts the wood. And I'm like, I'm right here, I'm doing the purchase. It's me that I cut the wood. So he realized his mistake, and he then gave me a free stuff, like the T-shirt and a bag, and I don't know. But, and I mean, this is people with good intentions, just like me when I answered that awful thing in the previous slide. And so that was weird, and that was, I mean, I laughed, but I figured there would be a good example to share with you how there are things that are usually described as part of being unconscious biases, things that we have baked into our brains, like the arborist shocked that a woman was mowing my lawn, or that the clerk assumed that I'm not operating the jigsaw, which is, I mean, why not? And as I said, there are things that even we got, you know, taught implicitly or explicitly since we're little. So it's difficult to fight or to mold those things. So in general, when we talk about unconscious bias, we are talking about things that we are not aware that we are being biased towards. Those are prejudices that we have that are like, they flow from within, and there is nothing that we do rationally to have them. It's something that is just flows through our brain. So one of the things that I think we can do is not to be ashamed, not to hate ourselves like I did with the response, but to try to be aware of that, try to pay attention to when this is happening, either from us, from other people that we see. Be forgiving about that, but try to notice it and do something about it. Like the very fact of noticing is just a step forward or towards a solution. So I think it's good that we talked about this, and particularly I think it's good to list a non-extensive list of things that you could ponder on, whether this is something that you relate to. Biases, unconscious biases can come from appearances, age, body size, race, I don't know. Then it can also come from data. I don't know, I've been doing a lot of interviews when I work at Canonical, and I will screen resumes, and there will be things in the resume that will make me feel that a candidate was better than another candidate. Like if they will say, I love test-driven development, I was like, yes, this is the candidate that I want, and I will put it like at the top of the pile. And that's just a bias for me, not just because someone likes test-driven development or do not mention test-driven development. It's fair to make an assumption about the quality of the engineer, or of the quality of the education of that person. So sometimes, title, education, or the language that person speaks can make us have like an unconscious bias about how we see someone, how we ponder about someone. The same with opinion. If we know that someone is the creator of something, we might think, oh, that must be a great person, that must be a cool person. So those are things that it's okay to have, but I think it's important that we think about them to see how that might affect how we relate to other people. So basically that's the conclusion. I think that particularly as a Django community, it will be good for us to think about this and to think about how we treat other people or how we assume things about other people based on these biases, and try to make them a little bit more conscious, because once they are conscious, we can do explicit things about them. More experiences. I'm trying to mix a little bit of experiences and then a little bit of what I call theory, but I'm not sure if that's the right concept. The work chat facepalm. This is a very old work chat, but originally in Canonical, I was the technical lead of the one-to-one file sync team. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the tool. It was a file syncing service. There will be like a daemon running in your desktop. There will be a server, and there will be a control panel, which is a UI, originally built in GTK and then in Qt. Anyway, I was a tech lead. I was in charge. My job was making technical decisions for that team. So we had a situation. We made a decision. We needed to build something. So there is this IRC chat work with a teammate. If he say, I did this thing, he will sorry, I didn't mean to say he, but it was a he. He will tell me. And I will say, okay, but wait, that's not what we agreed. We had a different plan. So he said like, yeah, but I decided it was better. And I'm like, no, wait, this is not what we decided. For many reasons, because I am the person that needs to make the decision, we need to do this differently. And I was very explicit and very determined that we needed to change this. And I had my reasons. But what did he say? You sound like my mom. I was like, I mean, how many of you, male, have been told you sound like my dad when you're telling someone what to do? Anyone? No? Okay, so this was at the time, I mean, this is my coworker is a really good person. We had fun together, and it was, another laughing experience. But when you look at it from above, let's say, or from further away, this is not so a comment that not woman will get. And it's, I would say, frustrating, or at least something to highlight and try to ponder. A similar experience, also at Canonical, we got this 360 review process where you would get reviews from above, from your sides, from your direct reports, and from yourself. So this is why it's called 360. Your manager, your colleagues, your direct reports, your peers, and yourself will do a review. That's a review that I got 1 year. I did a very good job. I was working really well. Sorry, modesty. And, but this is part of the point that I'm trying to prove. So this review process also allows to enter a free-form, optional free-form text where it's not anonymous, right? So people might write something or might not write something. But the expectation, I mean, my expectation, if they do write something, might be something, performance review related. So at the time, as I was technical lead of the Snapstore team, which is another team, I was making decisions, dealing with a lot of customers, other teams, doing a lot of things. Successfully, I will say. I was also 7 months pregnant. So what did I got in the free-form text? I was going to be a great mother. So as you see, I nailed the great mom performance review, quadrant or hectant, I don't know what it is. So, I mean, again, the person writing that had the best intention. I honestly think that and know that, they were trying to give a positive message, to be supportive of my situation. And I understand, I appreciate that. I still think that, well, we don't know, but I don't think that a male will have had, you'll be a great father on a review, on a performance review comment. I mean, we could never be sure, because that's the thing with diversity and inclusion. You don't have any proof, you don't have any way of measuring or being certain that this wouldn't have happened, to a person of the other gender. Still, I don't think it's appropriate for a work review, but it's, I would say, fun to share, or it's helping me being here, giving this talk to you and using it as an example. So these two concepts, you sound like my mom and you'll be a great mom. This is something that I think is a pattern that gets repeated in the, I would say, business industry, tech industry, or when you have an industry where you have different roles and you have like manager roles, leadership roles. When there is a woman, there is this double bind that is called, this mix, this confusing roles that are being expected from the other people, that women sometimes are associated with moms. So there are some conflicting expectations or stereotypes that come from that. Then the set of assumptions about how a mom is caring or looks out for the people, or makes sure that everyone feels okay, or gets attended, or if someone is upset, what is the problem with you, and try to do things about it, which is what I also like likability criteria, how warm you are, sometimes plays against being able to have a career, advance in your career. Because when you start being a person that is suitable for leadership, like you need to make tough decisions, you need to tell someone no or tell someone what to do, then you're starting to be mean or bossy, or I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that, it's bitchy. And it's a conflict, because there is an expectation, an implicit expectation that we are soft, I will say. This is what leads to talk about the paradoxes when talking about the double bind, which is we need to juggle. I would say we, because I felt I have the need to juggle, being determined and telling people what to do because of my role, but trying to be, putting some flowers around the message, saying, please, do you think that? I think it's a good idea if we, what do you think if, and that's cumbersome, and that's tiring, and that's exhausting, and I think it's unfair, because I don't think that male, and this is perhaps an unfair generalization, but I've been going through this. I don't think this is expected from male people, male persons in leadership positions. And in order to exemplify the paradoxes, 3 days before traveling here, I saw the Barbie movie for the first time. I'm not making any judgment about if it is good, if it is bad, if it is correct, if it is incorrect. That is not up for discussion right here. But there is this monologue from America Ferrera about what it takes to be a woman. And I took this fragment. It's not like I'm endorsing necessarily, but it's an example of the double bind, is how you are expected to do things, but at the same time, you're expected to do it in a way that sometimes is not compatible with the role. And I found it delighting. I wanted to share it here, but even though if you don't agree whether if it is delighting or not, this is like an example of the concept that I'm trying to share with you today. You can read it afterward in the slides. I have another set of experiences. I think that I don't have the 45 minutes, right? That I usually have. I should be, okay, I have 5 minutes. What? Okay. So I have 2 slides. I'm going to skip one. This is about how I went to a resort and I needed to have gluten-free food. Many of you know the anecdote of the food in the hotel. I had a lot of challenges, and I had a situation with the Mexican staff, which I'm not going to share right now in the interest of time, but I'm going to share this other experience, which is, I'm not sure if you recognize the person in the picture. That's Jacob, tried mate for the first time in Argentina in 2009. And I asked him whether he felt pushed. He said no, but I think he was being polite. I basically pushed him into try mate. And the mate is something that is a social norm, and it's a cultural tradition in Argentina. So I was really trying to have him tasting a little bit of the culture that he was visiting. And but then after the pandemics, I have started thinking a lot about sharing the mate. And the mate involves, having the thing that he has in his hand, which is a pumpkin-like thing that you will put some specific yerba mate, which is like a green tea leaves, and then you have a metal straw. And when you share mate with someone, everyone sips from the same straw, which is completely non-hygienic, I don't know why we do that. And I mean, with the pandemic, that stopped a little bit, but now in Uruguay, everyone is sharing mate again. That is not something that I'm doing right now, but it feels a little bit unsanitary. So my point with these 2 experiences, how I had this issue with the Mexican staff at the resort, and how I try to impose drinking mate to someone when visiting Argentina, is this thing that has been mentioned in a few talks, the cultural differences that we have. There are different cultures in the world. That's a fact. There is nothing that we can do. And each culture might have different customs, different ways of doing things, different expectations about what it is to be, a good person, or what it is to be polite, or what it is to have good manners. And I think that we, as a global community, we need to be aware of that, because many times we might find someone, being unpolite, or being, rude, or being too forward. And I think that one of the things that we need to think about is, that's another culture. What does that culture looks like? What are the traditions in the culture? Is that person trying to be friendly? But it's different for me because I come from another culture. So this is also something that I want to link with the keynote that Ned Batchelor presented on PyCon this year. That's an amazing keynote. I will recommend it for everyone to watch it. But he talks about being a good person and a good communicator. Of course, the keynote is very complex and very rich, but there are a few key points about it, being a good person and a good communicator. And now my proposal is, well, it's not as simple, because what is a good person and what is a good communicator depends on the culture. So I think that we need to look a little bit beyond being good person, a good communicator, and consider the cultures. I have a few slides now that it might take a bit of extra time, so I will try to, okay, I'm telling you that I can keep going. So I want to talk a little bit about cultures. And to do that, I did some research. There is a book that I have no affiliation with, but I asked permission from the author to share a few passages from it with you. It's called The Culture Map. It's not about technology. It's about how cultures can influence doing business in general globally. It presents 8 scales about, being aware of in order to be successful at making businesses, providing negative feedback, or having direct reports, respect for the leadership, and a few of the keys. But there are 2 of those scales that the author presents, which are about communicating and persuading in the context of a global war, in the context of different cultures, that I think are very relevant for us, for the Django community. I'm going to try to present those in 4 slides, actually. The communication skills describes, this is something completely new to me. When I read this, I was like, oh, wow, that's why. There are cultures that they tend to convey the messages in a very implicit manner. They will not spell out everything for you, and that's just part of the culture. That there are historic reasons for that, there are geographical reasons for that, and you can read about that in the book, but that's just how the way it is. There are some cultures that will not say everything, that will leave a lot of things out of interpretation of the person hearing the message. And then there are other cultures that are called low context because they don't need a lot of context to understand the message. They will be a lot more direct, explicit, and there will not be a message between the line. If you try to read something between the line, you might get the wrong message because this type of culture are very forward, very, what I'm telling you is what I mean. There is nothing behind the scenes. So this is a fact. There is nothing good or bad about each culture, but what happens when you have different persons from the different cultures communicating? There might be, a clash in there. Why? For example, if you have someone speaking between the lines to someone that expects a very explicit and very clear and complete message, that person might feel like they're being sneaky or that they are leaving things not spoken intentionally so they can change things afterwards. That's not the case. They're just different cultures. Or the other way around. If you have someone that is used to not get everything said out loud, when there is someone from the other culture saying everything and spelling everything out for them, they might feel, I'm being treated like a child. They're being patronizing or condescending to me. They don't feel like I'm capable of understanding what, the message. So what can we do? We're not going to change cultures. Each culture is what it is. I mean, eventually time might unify us a little bit. I don't know. But we can be aware of this. And when we're talking with someone, think that maybe spelling everything out might make them feel silly or childish, or not saying everything might give room to misinterpretation. So I think that one of the things that the author presents is that if you have people from different cultures having communication, which is exactly our case as a Django community, we should try to be a little bit more explicit about what we said, but also being explicit that we are being explicit because we want to avoid misinterpretation and we are a global community, not because I think that you are not understanding me and I'm being patronizing. Does that make sense? Yes, okay. The other point in the scale that the author presents, as I said, there are eight scales, but this is the other one that I want to talk with you today is persuasiveness. That in Spanish has a little of negative connotation when you want to be persuasive. You have maybe a little bit of a negative intention in there, but I don't think that's the case in English, but I like better saying being convincing. And why am I raising this with you, with the Django community? You know how we have the framework, and there have been talks about dinosaurs, and the change is inevitable, but sometimes within the community or within the fellowship, I want to say, we try to stop change a lot for many reasons. And sometimes when someone wants a new feature in Django, we say, okay, this needs to be discussed with the community. You need to go to the forum, create a post, explain why this will be a good idea. And if there is consensus, come back and we will push this forward. So at that point, you need to be convincing. You need to have the tools in order to explain the rest of the community why your idea is a good idea, it will be a good feature for Django. So I think this point is relevant for us. Basically, there are two types of cultures regarding being convincing. One is when you want to convince someone of a principle-first culture, you need to explain why. You need to explain the whole process from the theoretical concept to the specifics. So you need to start with some theory, and then you need to take the reader of that forum post up to the conclusion so they can walk with you in the reasoning of why that would be a good idea. But there are other cultures that will get bored in that explanation. They will see a lot of text, like a lot of theory, a lot of words, and they will say, nah, I will not read this. This is too long. This is boring. I will not read it. This is another type of culture. These cultures are more like action first, like the practical facts first, and then maybe once I understand how this works, like the tangible things, let's say, they will perhaps read a little bit of the theory and understand why that's that way. So these are two different cultures that we need to consider when trying to have someone being on board with our idea. An example of this is a piece of the documentation, of the Django documentation, the Django tutorial, the part 4, that sentence, you should know basic math before you start using a calculator. That's like a sentence that is making a strong affirmation about that. But that's really one of the cultures, you know? The cultures that will be principle first, like first you study math, then you use a calculator. But there is another set of people from another culture that will first use the calculator, and then they might go and understand math. I mean, this is not right or wrong. This is just an example of how sometimes we think something naturally and cannot see another way of doing things, but that there is actually another way of doing things. So it's great to think about this, particularly in super verbose. My manager always told me less is more, and I tend to do always more and more and more. Well, for Django in particular, the things that I think that we can do is try to mix a little bit of both, which is what I have tried to do in this talk, which is a little bit of practical examples, my experience, a little bit of theory, and going back and forth. So hopefully I keep you all the cultures entertained and attentive to what I'm sharing, because I don't want to get bored. I don't want you to get bored or to get sleepy or to get lost in the theory. Hopefully that worked. So we can try to do that, when writing emails and we're writing forum posts, trying to, that back and forth between concrete things, perhaps a little bit of theory, concrete things, and that will keep the attention of everyone reading. I have a few slides about language and how some languages, not the English, I really like English because you can genuinely speak neutrally in the language, but there are other languages like Spanish, which the documented norm is that you need to use the male form of the nouns and the adjectives to refer to a group of people. And particularly, when talking in Spanish, all these roles are easily referred to as a male group of doctors, medical doctors, construction workers, sport players, engineer, president, VP, senators, and all that. When you say it in Spanish, you use the male form of those. You will say, okay, well, that follows the rule, right? But something that is very frustrating for me, people refer to these groups, even in the plural form, in feminine. So it's the nurses, secretaries, teachers, cook. There is nothing wrong with this, being the female. But why do they generally use the female form to refer to those groups when the rule is that the male form should be used for the plural form. And I think this conditions our brain, since we're very little, about what can a female do when they are grown up, and what can a male aspire to when they are grown up. So this is something that I'm very conflicted with, because I have a small child. She's a girl. She identifies as a girl so far, and she's 5. And I want her to not think that she can only aspire to be a given set of profession, that she can be anything she wants. So I think the language plays an important role in that front, and I think it's important to be aware of that. And then there is also things about inclusive naming. There are some initiatives in the web that, if you're interested, you can read about. I will not go into details. There are some words that we can try to avoid in our coding, in our documentation, in order to be a little bit more inclusive. And also, I'm talking about being inclusive in the context of our conversation. Sometimes we refer to autumn, spring, next autumn, next spring. That only applies to half of the world. There is a south hemisphere that has the opposite, or well, not the opposite, the other season than the north hemisphere. So I think that this is something that I raised in Google Summer of Code, and I was completely dismissed. But when there is summer in the north hemisphere, there is winter in the south hemisphere, and the students do not have any time off to participate. So that's literally leaving half of the world out of the possibility of participating. There is also this acronym that we use that are super useful, but I think it's important for us to, the first time that we refer to an acronym, to spell it out, because otherwise, when we see CRUD, MTI, DTL, DTL, DDT, what the fuck is that? And particularly for me, DDL, if you look DDL, when you are in Argentina, Google, is dulce de leche, because it is a sweet. You don't need to read that; it's not readable. But it's a sweet which is amazing, and I love it. But every time that I saw DDL in the tickets, I was like, dulce de leche, what has to do with databases? Then I learned what it was. Anyway, be mindful of that. Try the first time that you mention an acronym, spell it out, and then you can, of course, use the acronym afterwards in your post, in your ticket, or whatever. I'm almost on time, right? Yeah. 5 minutes, great. I will get to talk a little bit about allies with you. This is something that I wanted to present the concept with an experience, but the experiences that I have when an ally was very important to me are very, I cannot share that with you in an anonymized way. So, and the people involved might retaliate, so I will not share an experience with that. But I want to talk about allies and how all of you, particularly the privileged groups in this community and in any community, can help marginalized and minority groups. Allies are usually people from the privileged groups, let's say male in the tech industry, that try to understand the problems that minority face and try to help from their privileged position and to enable and facilitate things for the minority groups. This is something that Rachel and Don talk about sponsorship, like saying someone, come on, give a talk, or sharing social media something, or I don't know, advocating for grants, or I don't know, or if you see, someone is violating the code of conduct, you will say, that's not what we do, but someone in the privileged position, not someone from the minority. That kind of voice, I will say sadly, it's not necessarily sadly the word, but still, that voice, I feel like still has more strength than the minority voice. So being in a privileged position, I will invite you to take on the responsibility to be an ally of minorities by learning a little bit more about the challenges around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and being active against it, and reaching out to someone and saying, that thing that happened, that wasn't right, it's not your fault. You shouldn't go through that, and trying, to provide support and to actively, whatever is within your reach, to do about it. I'm happy to talk about allies a little bit more afterwards. I think they are very important. And I have had allies in my career that have been crucial for me to keep going. So I'm very thankful for them. Sorry. And very important point, allies are not self-appointed. I have met people thinking that they're allies, and they are the opposite of that, and particularly because they are, saying, I'm an ally, I know everything about diversity and inclusion. You know, Daniele, who I'm talking about. So, conclusions. Sorry that I rushed the talk. Hopefully this was useful, but basically my conclusions are that this is very difficult. There are a lot of factors to consider. There is no magic formula. I don't have answers. I have experiences and I have thoughts about this. So I guess if I can ask anything from you is to acknowledge the problem and think about it, reflect, and then, that will be like the zero step, the first step. I think that a lot of people has already done that, which is great. I've seen a lot of great things. I had a great problem yesterday, which is I had to stand in line in the bathroom, the women's bathroom. I never had to do that before in a tech conference. That was amazing. Yeah. I was so happy to be standing in line. I didn't really need to pee, but I had to wait. So that was great. And then, well, of course, try to do whatever you can when it is reaching out to someone, doing something at your company, doing something, organizing events. So I don't know, there are many things that can be done. And, well, provide support, Allies are extremely important. I cannot stress that enough. At least to me, they have been key for me to be here today. Thank you.